have Rex Jackman from Caltrans here with us today.
Here.
Director Doug Hammerstrom.
Here.
Here.
Steve Scalmanini.
Here.
Director Larry Stransky.
Yes.
Director Jim Kugel.
Here.
Director Susan Ranichak.
Here.
Director Tom Woodhouse.
Here.
And Director Dan Jurdy.
Here.
Item number 2 is the election of officers. Yes. We do have some, we have a new member. I'll look old to me. Or seasoned. It's typically at the, I gotta remember, this is on TV or something, isn't it? Typically at the first meeting of the year, what we do is offer some training to the new members, and I only see one, and so if you would like to meet with us sometime when you're over here, we can sit down with you for an hour or two, or 5 or 6, and go over whatever you can stand.
Thank you.
If you'd like to do that, you can get with us.
All right.
Director Kugel. Anybody else would feel the need to meet with us?
I'd love to be retrained.
Some people are untrainable, and some are. I hope you're in the right category. Anybody else? Okay, that's the orientation opportunity. And as far as the election of officers, Janet, are you going to take over?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Okay, so it's the first meeting of the calendar year, and that's when we have our officers election. You've got my written staff report. There's no adopted rule for this procedure, so we've been following a procedure from Robert's Rules of Order for the past few years, and if you prefer another method and want to come up with another method for MCOG to use, you're welcome to do that. But in the absence of a rule, I'll go ahead with this if that's all right with everybody. So what I will do is ask for nominations for the office of chair. We don't need a second on a nomination, and when there aren't any more nominations, we'll close that. And I'll ask for a motion and a second to elect the chairman, and then we'll do the same for the vice chair. So I'd like to hear any nominations for the office of chair. And of course, go ahead.
I'll nominate Dan Jurdy.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, well, hearing none, I'll close the nominations and ask for a motion and a second to elect Dan Jurdy, or to re-elect him as the chairman for the year.
I'll also move that motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
great. And all in favor of electing Dan Jurdy chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Dan Jurdy is re-elected the chairman for 2016. Now I'd like to hear any nominations for the vice chair. The current vice chair is Director Hammerstrom. Anyone like to make a nomination?
I would like to recommend Mr. Hammerstrom for vice chair.
Okay, so that's a nomination for
Nominate?
Director Hammerstrom.
Yes, thank you.
Any others? We're basically looking for volunteers. It's a thankless task, so anyone who's willing to do that, we want to hear those names. Not hearing any other nominations. The nominations are closed. I'd like a motion and a second to re-elect Director Hammerstrom as the vice chair. We have a motion?
I so move.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you very much. All in favor of re-electing Director Hammerstrom?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think not. I've heard all ayes there, so motion carries, and Director Hammerstrom is reelected as the vice chair for 2016. And thank you very much for your patience with our procedure. And we're finished with that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
continue.
So we're going to convene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, immediately recess and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. The first thing on our agenda now is public expression on non-agenda items. This is a time for people in the audience, if they have comments on items that are not on the agenda, to speak.
My name is Pauline Gervin. I represent the Coyote Valley Band of Pomo Indians. We have been alarmed, as you well know, and I speak to you as co-governments in this jurisdiction. I realize that you as county and possibly city officials have jurisdiction, certainly not in Indian country, but I speak for the first inhabitants of this county who still have jurisdiction over their people and territories. We have been very alarmed, and so alarmed by the Caltrans Willits Bypass Project and the commitment of funds, continually the recommitment of funds from our county and city officials, when it's been clear in the public eye that all the local tribes have objected to the manner in which Caltrans failed to protect, failed to properly survey, failed to avoid cultural resources of the Ukiah and Pomo peoples. Our concerns are also on the unending pocketbook that our fellow governments in this county continue to dig into to fund this project. This project is a nightmare in Indian country. There will be another article in Indian country today, a national newspaper, explaining how emblematic our case is against the madness, the atrocities, the indignities of Caltrans. So I ask you to quit not digging into your pockets. There is, in the future, a 4-lane. I'm not so sure. They've only gotten funds right now to do the 2-lane. I'm not so sure how they'll get the 4-lane. And I read with alarm that the California, the overbody, the California Transportation Commission, approved a reduced estimate of projected funding available for state transportation programs by $754 million over the next 5 years. So even at the state level, the funds are running dry. I don't think they should have to be able to come to the counties and cities and say, and help perpetuate this case. And I beg of you to, at some point, zip up your wallets and concentrate on local needs, and please, as well as fellow governments in our region, heed the cries of the 3 local tribes, the Sherwood Valley, the Coyote Valley, and the Round Valley Indian tribes, who are in a great state of distress and alarm at how this project has proceeded. I ask you to maybe check in on their concerns as co-governments. There's no need for the cities and the counties and the tribes to be all separate and not communicating with each other. And I ask you, as governors in our government in our area, to try to maybe reach out, ask the tribal historic preservation offices at these 3 local tribes why they are so appalled at what's occurred, why all negotiations got nowhere. And as you may know, we are seeking injunctive relief, and our case is at issue and ready to set trial date. People say, why? 2/3 into a project, are you going for an injunction? We say, because we want no other tribe in California or the nation to have to go through what we've gone through. I'm a lawyer, I don't cry often. I'm pretty tough. But there has been a great disturbance of our local Native communities by this project. They feel gravely insulted by how they've been treated by Caltrans. The documents that were supposed to protect our sites, called a programmatic agreement, a post-review discovery and monitoring plan, they were supposed to be in place before construction began. 2/3 of the way through the project, no tribe has been willing to sign off on the self-serving provisions contained by Caltrans in these critical documents for site protection. 3 different tribes could not sign off on these documents. There must be something wrong with this picture. I please ask you to inquire. I please ask you to reach out to the tribes, your co-governors, the original nations in this region. And we too are citizens of the county. We too are citizens of your cities. So please, we couldn't get anywhere with Caltrans, and it's not cheap to go to court, and we're not big tribes. We have enormous cost we have to come up with, although our attorneys are very brilliant and have beat Caltrans in the past, but they're not intimidated by the federal government or state government. But we're pretty much intimidated by the cost us little tribes are having to come up with. So as we crunch into our pocketbooks to fight these people, I ask you once again to zip up your pocketbooks in the future.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to comment on non-agenda items?
Good afternoon, Adrienne Moore, Willett City Manager. I'm here today to reintroduce Dusty Dooley to many of you as the city's new planner. Dusty, as you know, has worked for the county for many years and will become a regular face representing the city of Willits. I also wanted to mention that April 18th, the week of April 18th, we'll be having our charrette in Willits for the Main Street Corridor Enhancement Project. And that project has been assisted with MCOG staff that we're very appreciative of, and Caltrans. So we hope to see some of you at the charrette. It's going to be a week-long event, and hope to come up with some great ideas. Thank you. The hours for the charrette, that hasn't been established yet. We're meeting in a couple of weeks, the advisory group, which you're a part of, and we'll have that slated at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, and the county's loss was the city of Willits' gain when you got Dusty.
Well, our hope is that you can still, have a positive relationship. I'm Holly Madrigal, the Willits City Council. I may not be able to stay for your full meeting today, so I apologize if this is on the agenda. The CTC letter was certainly very concerning. I know Commissioner Stransky will be watching this on our behalf, but I didn't know if it would be possible to get a list of the programmed projects by region so that we could, potentially that would be affected, even if it's borderline, so that we can go through our own evaluation process when we're advocating for the projects that we, are willing to go to the mat for versus ones that, we can hold off on those sorts of projects. If we could get some sort of list by region, or even just Willits, that would be very helpful. And I look forward to hearing how that develops, because it's certainly concerning for our local transportation needs. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other members of the public want to comment on non-agenda items? Not seeing any, we'll go into our regular calendar appointments to standing committees. We have the Executive Committee, the Transit Productivity Committee, and the California Association of Council of Governments assignment. Janet, are you going to go over this?
I can talk a little about that. The council is to appoint the executive committee according to the bylaws, so we'll want a motion on the third member. We automatically have the chair and the vice chair as the first 2 members. So we need 1 more member reflecting a city-county balance. It looks like we already have city and county representation in the 2 officers, so it could be either for the 3rd. It's currently Director Woodhouse. So I guess we're looking for a volunteer and then take an action to formalize that. So.
I've enjoyed doing it. If someone else would like to step aside, that would really benefit them.
Okay. Usually what we do is meet in February to look at the first draft of the budget so that we get the blessing on staff's proposed budget and then move it on through the steps, the other steps in the budget. So it's kind of a kickoff for the budget season. Later in February, we'll need to schedule a meeting. So just to let you know what the executive committee is going to be expected to do, that's the main thing. And then occasionally during the year, we may have other matters that come up. They might be financial or policy matters, things like that.
So Director Woodhouse is stating he's already trained.
Yeah, and there really only are a couple of meetings a year typically. So. But you have to read a lot of stuff.
Would anyone like to make a motion? And if I'm not hearing anybody else volunteering to be on the executive committee.
It sounds like Director Woodhouse is willing to do this chore, so.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
And that does not require a roll call.
All those in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Great, thank you so much. The second one is appointed by the chair. So we have the Transit Productivity Committee currently with Chair Jurdy and Vice Chair Hammerstrom on that, all trained up in the transit issues. You know, one thing you might want to consider is whether, well, here's who's on that committee. We have 2 MCOG board members, 2 MTA board members, and a 5th member representing the senior centers in Mendocino County, who also have some transportation services. So the question I might have is, do we want to have another member who is also an MTA member, or is that a benefit? Those are things to think about, but in any case, we basically need 2 MCOG members who are willing to serve. In April, we look at MTA's annual claim for funds, and we look at the unmet needs analysis. You remember hearing all those unmet needs back in December. We get a recommendation from that group, that committee, on the required finding at budget time. So that's what will happen in the near term, and then once a year we get together and look at transit performance issues. So a lot of data and statistics about how the transit services are operating. We look at those together, and those are the main issues really that come up.
So I'm willing to serve on it again. Starting last year, I was appointed to the MTA board. Prior to that, I was never on the MTA board, and I was reappointed to the MTA board this year. So if I'm on it, just to let everybody know that I'm also on the MTA board as of a year ago.
And that can be a benefit because you're familiar with the issues. On the other hand, it might weight it a little too far to the MTA side. So there's just things to consider.
Does anyone else want to serve on the Transit Productivity Committee?
Well, I've served on it, but I would suggest that maybe somebody else should step into this sort of role and kind of spread it around a little more. And this is going to be my last year on the Fort Bragg City Council, so last year on MCOG, and so I won't be going forward, and so somebody else could start and begin the continuity going forward on this. So.
Well, it can be kind of fun. There's a lot to talk about. You know, staff gives a lot of support on putting together all the information you need to look at, and
it certainly gives you a lot more background on MTA for things that we do vote on.
Yeah, and the MTA staff is very helpful in bringing information in and their perspective. We also like the senior centers to give us their perspective. because the decisions affect them as well, so.
Yeah, let's not push the fun aspects of it, but
It's not the most fun committee.
the
right
amount
now.
of things you'll learn and be aware of by participating.
So Jim, I know Point Reyes is really far away, but on the other hand, if it was absolutely necessary, you could call in to the meeting.
Yeah, I have EDSC as well as MCOG that I'm
Okay.
committed to, and calling in is crazy for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually we get all our business done in one meeting a year, sometimes two, and that's about it. So,
Well, Steve, MTA has its most intensive service here in Ukiah.
I'm seeing a distinct lack of other volunteers.
yeah.
Everybody else step back.
So the bottle sort of has spun and points this direction, since other people have plenty on their plates. So I'll join in with that. I'm concerned about the prep time for it,
Yeah.
considering all the other reading I do for other things, but let's give it a shot.
I think you could primarily look at it as a way of getting additional information that will then actually be helpful for when you vote on it at MCOG. So I don't think that it's a big commitment. Okay, hearing that, then I'll appoint Steve Scalmany and myself to the Transit Productivity Committee. And then we have the appointment to California Association of Council of Governments. Again, it's mostly following emails that will be sent to you. I'm happy to be the alternate, but I think it's also an opportunity for someone else on the board to be maybe the voting delegate. There is a meeting at least once a year where they have a vote on a few things. This is our statewide association that lobbies on behalf of transportation funding. So I don't, is someone else interested in being the voting delegate and I could be the alternate?
And you see in my staff report that the annual regional issues forum is at the end of March, March 30th through April 1st, and that's in Monterey. And that's a really interesting meeting. There's a lot of networking. It's not like a great, huge conference. It's really mainly other regional agencies like MCOGs and often elected officials and other staff people who attends this, Phil. We have a really interesting group, maybe 80 people in a room and some breakout sessions and lots of networking opportunities, and it's really a learning experience.
And maybe 5 years ago, the CalCog hired Bill Higgins, who prior to that was a staff person for the League of Cities on housing and transportation issues. So that's his background, and I think he's also an attorney. He's just an interesting person, and I feel that since he's been the director, I haven't gone to all the conferences. I tend to go every 2 or 3 years, but it seems to me that he's brought in maybe a more interesting mix of speakers. Sometimes they're talking about the federal highway bill that was moving its way forward and speculation what might get into that. And then he always has people from Sacramento, either the head of Caltrans or the Transportation Commission, talking about funding throughout the state that we might see coming forward. So
we get a lot of interesting presentations. It kind of gives you the big picture, what's going on in the state, and
Okay, now you can push the fun aspect.
It
It's
is
in
fun.
Monterey for 3 days.
it really is fun. And they do try to make it fun, but it's really interesting. They do presentations kind of looking ahead at what's happening with the next generation, and how are they using transportation, social media, just many kind of new things in the mix, things to look at.
Looking at me again. Well, it's mainly transportation, but there are other issues that are brought up in the same context. Statewide issues that you may know a little about. There's opportunity to learn some more details. So.
Yeah, and I think there may be a few other meetings during the year. Are they as much as
which
quarterly?
you can do by phone also.
Business meetings, and you can phone into those, yeah.
Anyone interested in being the voting CalCog delegates?
So it was Trevor Sanders, and he's resigned, so we need a fresh new delegate for this.
Larry, do you want to leave bullets every once in a while?
Nope. I'm too busy.
Director Woodhouse went to that meeting last year, didn't you?
It was fun, seriously.
You could go again.
This is exciting.
Monterey again, last year too?
Of course, we have a qualified definition of fun, but yeah.
Nobody will consider doing this?
Well, I'm open to it, it's just, yeah, my issue is just the time commitments. And that's not clear to me how much, prep is required and such. But, and on the voting part of it, do we go over that here first, I assume?
Not necessarily, no.
Uh-oh.
Generally
Well-
speaking, people go there because they want to vote to endorse more funding for transportation.
Okay, I'll take the plunge.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we need to take an action and just have a motion to appoint the CalCog delegate now and an alternate, so we need some kind of an action here.
So does someone want to nominate Director Scalmanini to be the voting delegate? And I volunteer to be the alternate.
I will make that motion.
I'll second that.
All right, we're making progress. Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we're on to the webinar
Okay.
presentation of the Greater Ukiah Area Microsimulation Model.
Okay, so if you'll just give us a moment to bring up the visuals, and maybe our staff can, planning staff can talk to you about the project.
Okay, this is the fill time. I'm filling in here while we're getting our webinar going. I want to talk to you a couple minutes about what this is about. It really stems from years ago, in my mind, when we did a interchange study of the Ukiah Valley and looked at, that was in 2005, here we are 11 years later, and looked at what some of the interchange improvements may be needed. And we had some recommendations back then. We haven't got around to doing any of them yet. We're getting closer. In looking at some of the recommendations from back then, Caltrans suggested that, well, maybe there are some other alternatives we should be looking at rather than ramp signalization. Maybe there's some geometric improvements. And the more we talked, we kind of figured out that, well, maybe what we should be looking at is a more specific model of the Ukiah, Greater Ukiah area and the Ukiah Valley here that would give us more specific ideas of what type of improvements we may be needed in the future. At the same time, up in Eureka, City of Eureka and HCOG and Caltrans had some experience and put together a micro-simulation model of the greater Eureka area. They found it very helpful in analyzing not only developments that may be coming in, but also giving some specific recommendations as far as improvements that would be needed to the not only the highway system but the local system. So and with some help of Caltrans, we were able to locate some funding through the state to produce what we called the GUAM, the Greater Ukiah Area Micro Simulation Model, to produce essentially the same kind of a model that was produced in the Eureka area. And we have specific uses, I think, from MCOG perspective. Again, we're looking at what do we need to do with some of these interchanges in the future at Perkins Street, North State Street, as well as some of the ideas for increased circulation in the local system, such as the extension of Orchard in Ukiah further to the north and tie in not only at 4th Street but maybe further north, all the way maybe to like Mendocino Drive? What kind of things would make sense to keep pressure off the local system and produce the most economical and efficient system? So that's where we are, and this it's been going on for about a year. We've been working on with a consultant Caliper in developing the model. We got down to the end of it. The contract finishes soon, but today we wanted to give you a presentation of the results, what the whole model theory was about, and what kind of uses we can put to in the future. I mentioned what our perspective, and from the county has some county roads that they would want to be looking at more specifically in this, within the area encompassed by this study. The city has a number of projects, including signal type projects and perhaps some roundabout projects. We can all take a closer look at these through the use of this model. And with that, Loretta, what do you have to say?
I think he covered it fairly well. You have my staff report in front of you, just giving you a basic description of how the project came about. Caltrans actually was awarded the state planning and research grant, and they asked MCOG to administer it. We brought it to the board, and the board agreed, and we did a competitive recruitment process, ended up hiring Caliper Corporation, and it was a fairly good-sized project, a $250,000 grant. It's been ongoing for about a year. It took some time to get it off the ground with a pretty involved technical RFP. And there was a technical advisory group that participated during the entire year, comprised of representatives from Caltrans, MCOG, the County Department of Transportation, and the City of Ukiah. They had a lot of input into they gave a lot of information to the consultant in developing the model, and participated in regular biweekly conference calls. And the consultant did a good amount of research on capital improvement projects between the county and the city in building the model, the types of things that needed to go into it. And today, after today's presentation, we want to have a chance if you have any questions for the consultant, but for actual board action on the report, we're not going to put that on until the March agenda, so you can have the report in front of you. It's being finalized now, but we're ready for the presentation now.
Well, we're almost ready. Until you see something up on the screen. Here we go. Standing by is the Dan Morgan from Caliper Corporation.
And I just had one more thing. Dan did conduct a training of county staff, city staff, and Caltrans last week, and you have that training agenda attached to your staff report so you can view the type of topics that were covered.
So Dan Morgan is available from the Boston area right now. Is he there? Dan is here. And he'll take over from here.
I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you this afternoon. Thank you for giving me some time this afternoon to speak to you remotely. I heard Phil give a pretty comprehensive overview and background of the project, so I'll try not to retread any of that ground. Loretta told you about our technical advisory group, which was very important for a consultant located in Massachusetts to be able to build a model of Ukiah many, many miles away. So we used their valuable input and guidance throughout the course of this project, and I want to start by saying, thank you to them as well. So let me show you what we maximize this presentation, and I'll also just warn you there is an off chance that I lose audio here. If that does happen, I'll return to the meeting as quickly as possible, just in case. Okay, so I'll go through the background of the project and touch on a little bit about the scope of the model and the area that it covers. what kind of level of detail we included in the model, as well as what we did to establish confidence that the model does a good job of replicating the traffic that we observe in the field in terms of traffic count and travel time. We took some measurements to get a good understanding of traffic flow in the city. And I'll present some of those results. And then I'll close with a demonstration of the model's application to proposed projects in and around the greater Ukiah area. So backing up, I want to spend a moment just to describe what microsimulation modeling is and why we do it. So microsimulation modeling begin by telling you what it's not. So it's different from other transportation models like travel demand models that are used to forecast travel demand for a city or county or metropolitan region. So metropolitan planning organizations and departments of transportation use travel demand models to use land use information and demographic data to predict what will happen to the transportation system 10, 20, possibly even 30 years out in the future. But those tools take a very coarse, big picture view of traffic flow phenomena. They don't represent what happens at signalized intersections. They don't provide much detail in terms of vehicle movements and merging, and weaving and other kinds of facilities that are very operationally sensitive in terms of traffic flow and queuing. So the microsimulation model, the GLOM, is designed to complement the travel demand model for Mendocino County. So it works together with it to predict traffic and traffic operations in the city, but it does not duplicate or replace what the travel demand model does. And the microsimulation model is designed instead to simulate the movements of individual vehicles through the network. So we estimate how many vehicles in a morning or evening peak period are traveling from one point in the greater Ukiah area to another. And we produce a departure time for that trip and predict a path that a trip departing at that time would be likely to take to get from point A to point B. So again, the main difference from other planning tools used in the region is that this model will simulate what drivers do while they're executing their trip, what path they choose, how they accelerate or brake to stop at a signalized intersection, how and when they change lanes, things of that sort, so that we can capture what are the effects of, say, adding an acceleration lane at the end of an on-ramp or replacing a stop-controlled intersection with a roundabout or a signalized intersection. And again, the reason that we use microsimulations is because we want to be able to answer difficult questions about how traffic operations might affect communities, businesses, and other interests, both in terms of access management and general user experience on the transportation system in terms of delays and travel times. And these tools can be used to dynamically visualize traffic operations, where queues form, where bottlenecks may form, and when the level of service of the transportation system declines, so that we can use this tool as a sandbox where we can test different strategies for improving the traffic conditions. We might test roadway improvements, we might test signalization, we might change the configuration of an interchange, etc. So the model allows us to answer these questions with state-of-the-art analysis. Microsimulation gives us the most detailed and most accurate picture of what happens on the transportation system relative to other modeling tools. And being able to answer those questions, then we can prioritize projects or do alternative analysis to ask which projects are likely to give better bang for the buck, or to yield the greatest benefit when projects compete for limited resources. So now let's talk a little bit about the model scope. As Bill mentioned, the model covers the greater Ukiah area. More specifically, it spans about 16 miles of US 101 from roughly 8 miles south to 8 miles north. It includes all of the interchanges along 101 and all of the surface streets in and around Ukiah, including the county streets within that stretch. And it also covers a bit of SR20 heading towards Lake County and other state routes in the study area such as 222 and 253. Now this picture on the right shows you what that coverage looks like relative to Mendocino County, which is the coverage of the travel demand model with which the Guam works closely. Now zooming in closer, I'll give you a sense of the level of detail that we aim to include when we build models such as this one. We want to have a very accurate representation of the street and intersection geometries. And what I mean by that are, where are there turn bays or turn pockets, two-way left turn lanes, how wide are the lanes? All of these geometric features have an influence on how drivers behave when they drive through them. In addition to a model of the streets, we also input to this model the signal timings for signalized intersections, and we include models of the bus routes and their stop locations and schedules. So to a degree, we can capture what happens in the public transportation sphere as well. Now, when we build a model like this, we want to be able to demonstrate that it's capable of producing results that comport with observations in the field, and this is called a calibration step. And we feed the calibration with a variety of data. So we collected volumes and speeds on 101 in the spring of 2015. We collected directional counts using tubes that are laid across the road on various ramps along 101 and surface streets on City of Ukiah and County of Mendocino streets. We installed cameras temporarily at all signalized intersections and at some of the ramp intersections in order to collect turning movement counts. And we also used that video data to measure the rate at which vehicles discharge from a queue at a signalized intersection. And lastly, we drove at State Street and 101 to collect travel time information. So these were the data that we collected from the field in order to prepare the Guam. And using the traffic count data, both the volumes that we measured on 101, the volumes that we measured on the ramps, and the turning volumes we collected at intersections, we started a process of taking the travel demand model for the entire county to estimate what are the volumes of trips traveling from point A to point B in the Ukiah area, and then to refine that estimate so that we match both the geographic or spatial distribution of trips as well as the temporal one, or the pattern of trip making over time. And we used a 15-minute time interval to divide up time. And so what we end up with is a pattern of trips across a 3-hour peak period in the mornings and evenings for a typical weekday. After that, we simulate the route choices that all those drivers make with their departure times in those 15-minute windows, and go back and compare the simulated volumes to counts from the field and continually readjust until the model is able to match closely what we've observed in the field. So that calibration step is followed by a validation step. So a model generally can match counts well, but it can match counts for all the wrong reasons. So a validation step is sort of a check on the calibration to make sure the model is robust and can match other data, a different set of data measured from the field. And we use travel time measurements taken from cars driving with GPS, the global positioning systems, in the car on 101 and State Street. And a similar iterative process is followed there, where we simulate, select those travel times, compare them to what was measured in the field, and make adjustments to the model input until the model results come into line with what's observed in the field. And that occasionally requires returning to calibration in order potentially to make adjustments to the estimated traffic volume. Now, the standards for declaring a model well calibrated and well validated come from Caltrans guidelines, which we used in the development of this model. We were able to satisfy all of the criteria that they set forth in terms of matching counts and travel times from the field. So after the calibration and validation of the model was complete, we wanted to demonstrate the application of the model so that Mendocino Council of Governments and the city and the county and Caltrans could all see how the model can be applied to evaluate different roadway facilities. And in order to do this, we wanted to be able to demonstrate how the model can be used to estimate the effect of a proposed roadway improvement or land use development, such as Costco being proposed on Airport Park Boulevard. And the model is powerful because it can tell us what might happen, not just adjacent to the site for the roadway improvement, but what might be the ripple or domino effect across the street system in Ukiah. So the model application was designed to be able to show how the tool can be used as a decision support tool for area government. In designing the model application, we went through the COG's list of projects in the capital improvement program and assembled them into 3 broad categorizations of projects with guidance and concurrence from the technical advisory group. So we identified projects that were currently have program funding and were very likely to be built in the near future. Those are existing plus committed projects. A second group of projects we classified as intermediate did not necessarily have program funding, but had a good chance of receiving funding and support to be built, but perhaps 5 or 10 years further out. And then an optimistic set of projects were all of the above, plus other projects in the capital improvement program list that would be funded if there were an optimistic funding outlook. And so we tested each of these packages of roadway improvements under 2 different forecast views. So we used the travel demand model for the county to estimate traffic for 2020 and 2030 in a manner that pivots from the calibrated estimates of traffic demand that we calibrated with measurements in 2015. So some of the projects that we evaluated are shown in these images. So for example, we looked at interchange improvements at the North State interchange, where the southbound off-ramp, if you watch here closely, is realigned to meet at an intersection with the southbound on-ramp. And signalization of the ramp was also, or the intersection was also implemented. In another project, we looked at the downtown streetscape improvement plan, where a stretch of State Street was converted from a 4-lane arterial to a 2+1, or that is an arterial with 1 lane in either direction and a center 2-way left turn lane. In another project, we looked at changing an all-way stop at Commerce Drive and Airport Park Boulevard to a signalized intersection. So there are quite a few improvements such as this, including another where we looked at a roundabout at Brush and Locat. And a final example, we looked at Redemeyer Road and Orchard Street extensions. Here we see the Lake Mendocino Drive interchange area north of Ukiah. And in just a moment, we'll see the Redemeyer Road and Orchard Street extension. So the model can be used to analyze interchanges, intersections, and entirely new roadways or roadway extensions. And when we test these projects in the model, we want to be able to tell what we want to be able to quantify the improvements we would expect, so that we can make a judgment about whether the project is worth the resources or that they would require. So we use levels of service based on an industry standard reference called the Highway Capacity Manual to judge the performance of interchanges, intersections, urban streets, and freeways based on measures of performance like speeds, densities, delays, and other performance metrics. And generally, we found that the projects that we tested in these future scenarios lead to improvements in performance, or they mitigate to some degree deteriorating performance as traffic growth continues into 2020 and 2030 forecast years. So this video shows what the model looks like while it's running. Hopefully you are seeing it there. Occasionally movies can have trouble over GoToMeeting. But you'll see individual vehicles driving through the Perkins Street interchange here. They'll slow down and stop at red lights, which you can see, or you may be able to make out, are represented by green and red arrows at the intersection, where we have intersections that are actuated, which is to say that the amount of green time that a movement gets is governed by the amount of traffic that's detected at the intersection. We have blue detectors in the pavement that measure the arrival and presence of vehicles. So the entire traffic control and traffic itself system is simulated in order to take those measurements of performance. With that, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions that anyone may have about the model or the project.
Sound to me like the definition of project is all transportation projects, not developments that might affect traffic.
That's correct. So the projects that we tested as part of these existing plus committed, intermediate, and optimistic future year projects were roadway improvement projects. However, by taking the 2020 and 2030 forecast of traffic from the regional travel demand model, we incorporate demographic growth and new land use developments, at least to the extent to which they are represented in the travel demand model. However, during the training last week, I showed members of the technical advisory group how they can test other land use developments more specifically and more accurately. And we looked at the expansion of the Walmart and the addition of a Costco in southern Ukiah. So the model can be used to do more focused studies of a new land use.
So does that mean that it can be done, it can look at the intersection of Highway 20 and Road A and Redwood Valley as the effect on that intersection of a development in Redwood Valley that will bring a lot more traffic from outside the little town area?
It will, to rely to some extent, so the model will always rely to some extent on the regional travel demand model, because the microsimulation model will only simulate the volumes that are input to it. It doesn't have its own forecasting component, so it will not predict how much new traffic will be drawn to a land use without, one, there being assistance from the travel demand model that's used to make those forecasts, or use of another tool that's built into the software, which uses Institute of Transportation Engineer trip generation rates based on different types of developments. So if you're building a commercial or residential or office park or restaurant, in any land use type, it will predict the traffic that's attracted to that new land use and place that new traffic in the model. So there are tools to help you do that, either by using trip generation tools in the software or coupling it with the travel demand model.
And so if I wanted that in a few months' time frame, what's the process to get that?
The process is probably going to most likely be up to Mendocino Council of Governments or Caltrans, at least in terms of an administrative process. From the modeling side, which I can speak to, the Guam's value is being able to accelerate those kinds of analyses.
Dan,
So if you have
if I can,
proposed land use or a new site, you now have a tool that doesn't require everything you see on the screen right now in front of you to be put together. You have the base road network, the existing road network, you have all of the signal timing, and you have the existing background traffic. So you effectively have a launching pad to conduct kind of analysis you're describing very, very quickly, as opposed to the state of the practice is to have to build a model from scratch every time you want to perform such an analysis.
Dan, this is Rex, and if I might be able to interrupt briefly,
Please.
speaking more specifically to Commissioner Scalmanini's question, I believe the location that he was asking about is outside the area of this particular microsimulation model. However, I think as standard land development practice, the county would be able to require a traffic impact study be conducted at whatever intersections are reasonable for any particular development. And it might not be necessary to employ microsimulation modeling. Conventional methods can also look at a specific intersection or a specific site or even a series of intersections to determine what traffic impacts might be the result of any particular change in development. So I would assume, and not sure exactly what the circumstances are of the particular development that you're asking about, but it would be safe to assume that the county, as part of the CEQA process, would have an assessment of those traffic impacts and then require the applicant, as a condition of approval for their project, to make those improvements necessary to mitigate those impacts. Sorry to get off track there, Dan.
So I have a
Oh, thanks, Rex.
this Dan Jurdy on the board. I have a question. Tim Erickson, the director of Department of Transportation for the City of Ukiah, is here, and since this really primarily affects the City of Ukiah, I'm just kind of curious, have you seen this prior to today's presentation? And if so, do you feel that this information is helpful for the City of Ukiah? Hopefully the answer is yes.
I may have to ask you to repeat that. You asked me if I'd seen something.
No, I'm sorry, I asked the question of Tim Erickson, who's in the audience, and he just came to the microphone.
Yeah, I'm Tim Erickson, the city engineer, and yeah, this is helpful. The MCOG put on a training for, it was supposed to be for me, I didn't attend, but my engineers did. So it's very helpful. It'll be used a great deal for, future project planning. So. Any other specific questions?
Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone, members of the audience, have any questions for the presentation?
I'll just comment that Loretta mentioned early on that we had training, and it was last Wednesday and Thursday. We had a number of people there. The county Department of Transportation director was there early like I was, and we both flaked out after a while. But he had some of his staff there available taking the training. Rick Senor from the city, I showed up at the end, and he was still there. So he followed through the whole time, and there were a number of Caltrans people there, and I just want to, I don't know whether this was stated at the beginning or not, but the intent is that Caltrans will house the model. They're going to help us use it when we need to. They have trained staff that were thoroughly trained in this type of model and have been using it in Eureka. There is a countywide Guam model in Lake County that's also being used over there. And Howard's here, so I'll let him take over.
Mr. Chair, I'll just, Howard Shield, County Transportation. I'll give a little plug too. You know, I only caught about half of Dan's training, and my staff told me later I missed the best part, which is where he modeled if we had an Orchard Street extension that came up through Brush Street Triangle and along where Ross Liberty has his industrial park proposal that, you know, several of you are interested in. So this model might actually help with new development. It might help us model, say, a new facility and possibly justify building a new road. It's true, most of this is centers around the city. It has most of the streets, I get that. But it's pretty important. We also looked at Redemeyer Road extension. I know that's way off in the future. I know that's something we studied, and you know it's way off in the future, just like Orchard Street. But I do think it's helpful, and my staff hopefully understood it. The reason I left Dan was it was just too complicated for me. Okay.
So this is Dan Jurdy asking a question, I guess, of Dan on the phone. Does this modeling also allow for evaluating whether or not to change the timing of traffic lights? I've seen reports that sometimes you can get more efficiency out of an intersection just by changing the synchronization on traffic lights from block to block, and maybe even changing them throughout the course of the day. So I don't know if that technology has already been developed, incorporated into the traffic lights here in Ukiah, but you know, it stands to reason that people's traffic patterns change throughout the day, so you might even want to change them throughout. So is that something that this software can be used to look at?
Absolutely, yes.
Does anybody on the board have any more questions? I know we have some other people in the audience here for other agenda items, so I don't know if we want to wrap this one up or now or not.
Well, thank you, Dan. It doesn't appear there's any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to point out that you know, we are wrapping this up, and we'll likely come back at the March meeting, or
We will. We'll bring the final report back, maybe on consent calendar to accept the report.
Okay, all right.
we wanted to have you see what we were doing and what we came up with, and it does provide a lot of information for projects that the county and the city both have in mind in the future.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, you notice there's people here in the audience, and we did get a late start because of a prior meeting, and I was wondering if we might consider moving on to item 8 and coming back to item 7.
Sure, I think that makes sense. So item number 8 is consideration of a short-term loan to the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District to provide cash flow pending state reimbursement for the transportation mitigation project on Denmark Creek in Anderson Valley.
Mr. Chairman, you members of the council, you have my written staff report in here somewhere, and let's hope you read it because I haven't found it yet. And essentially, is we in dealing with reimbursement from state agencies, this is it's a common problem to have to upfront some money for projects and have to go through quite a few hoops before you're able to seek reimbursement. The Mendocino County Resource Conservation District contacted me, and there's a letter to me dated January 8th, which kind of outlines the help that they are requesting from us. As outlined in my staff report, we do have experience with this agency. They have taken on the long-term project for mitigation with the Willits bypass for the wetland creation project, and we gave them some initial help early on with that particular project, and I can't believe it's been 6 years ago, but I guess it has. As noted in the report, we were able to loan them a short term in which they paid back ahead of schedule in the past. They called it a bridge loan. I wasn't calling that because I didn't want you to think we were financing a bridge, but it certainly will provide some funding in the gap. Bottom line is that they came through in the past on two different times, paid us back, and we do have the funds to help them out this time, and staff recommendation is to go ahead and approve this loan.
Do we have any questions for staff? The Mendocino County Resource Conservation District, Patricia Hickey's here. Does someone from the Resource Conservation District want to just say a few words?
Patricia, I just ask you to sign in when you're done speaking.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for meeting with us today. And so the RCD often we work with our other state agency partners to do restoration projects. And this particular project, it was a fish passage barrier in the Anderson Valley, and it was considered by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife an important fish passage barrier. And so we found two sources of money. Often we have to find match funding for different agencies, and each agency has its own requirements for reimbursement. And so this was kind of tricky. One was the Prop 84 funding, which requires you to pay your match before they're willing to pay your part, and then the EMP funding is for reimbursables only. That means that we have to actually submit canceled checks. And the RCD is very committed to working with local contractors. And those are, they don't have big lines of credit. We also do not have lines of credit, so it can be tricky. In this particular project, the work was done in October, and our Prop 84 funding is 6 months out because of invoicing problems, and then we just had a low cash flow that we hadn't anticipated. So we have a small contractor who's waiting now many months to get paid, and so we're asking for a 2-month bridge loan. So we can, if you gave us a loan, we would pay the contractor, they'd submit us the cancel check immediately, and we'd submit it to EMP, and then we have been told, I think the turnaround time is about 30 days. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Oh, gee. Hi, my name's Joe Scriven. I'm a fisheries biologist for the Resource Conservation District, and wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to our request, and to Phil and Janet for taking the time to meet with us. This is an important project for the fisheries restoration, and we think it's a great example of what landowners can do and what our local contractors can do as well. We've got a lot of expertise in this county for stream watershed restoration efforts, and we anticipate using this site actually as an example for tours with other landowners, other funding sources, to show that we can do this in county with local businesses, and it's an economic boon, and it's a benefit to our water resources and our fish. And so just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to consider our request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been my privilege to work with the RCD, and they're great partners at accomplishing the kinds of things we want. So when you're ready, I'm ready to make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
So I think this says in the staff report that
Your microphone needs to be pushed.
I believe the staff report says that MCOG has done this sort of short-term loan process before, so that the mechanics of it you're aware of, and on the merits of it, I'm totally on board. I'm just wondering whether, when this was done priorly, anyone researched whether we have the authority to actually engage in that sort of contract. I mean, I'm totally willing to do this one and just make sure that I'm not violating some fiduciary duty in doing it, and whether the legality of engaging in advancing money was then researched or has now been researched, or whether anybody's thought of that question. Just whether we have the authority to make this sort of decision.
Well, Director Hammerstrom, we have a precedent. I did not check with County Council. It is local funds that we had used in the past that are our sales tax money. They are not state or federal funds that we had used. And I think I stated before, I believe it was about 6 years ago, and it was startup money for for MCRCD to get them going on a mitigation project. I believe we do have the authority to do this. And once again, I'm proposing a no-interest loan. Anybody who has any money in the bank will understand that I don't think we'll incur much of a loss.
Okay, Director Woodhouse, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move the action that was requested to approve a short-term, no-interest loan of $50,000 to the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District, payable by March 1st, 2016.
And I'll second.
Okay. And before we vote, I just want to ask one more time, do we have any members of the public who want to comment? Not seeing any? Okay.
I have one question about the graphics here. I believe the lower one is pre-1965. The map I'm looking at here. Yeah.
It was in the staff report?
Yeah, in the staff report.
I'm not sure what the staff report includes.
Well,
okay, here.
You have it?
Trying to get my bearings.
This is a topographic representation. Okay. And what's your question?
It just looked like the pre-1965 map, you know, with the newer highways not on it, I think.
I don't know what the year is. This is just a software program for our topographic mapping. I don't know what the year is on that exactly, but the location is actually somewhat interesting. Driving between Boonville and Philo, on the right-hand side, you'll pass Lycan Estates, and there's that side road along there. You take that side road to the dead-end sign, and that is the place where 128 used to cross the creek. That has all been removed, and now it has fish passage. The logs and boulders are installed as designed, and it's an easy access if you're in Alexander or Anderson Valley. We'd be happy to take you on a tour, but if you happen to be in the neighborhood, swing by and take a look as well if you have a chance.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. I think we should have probably a roll call vote. Money is involved.
Rex Jackman,
Aye.
Doug Hammerstrom,
Aye.
Steve Scalmanini,
Aye.
Larry Stransky,
Yes.
Jim Kugel,
Aye.
Susan Ranichak,
Yes.
Tom Woodhouse,
Aye.
Dan Jurdy.
Yes. Okay, now, thank you very much. We'll now get on to, back over to agenda item number 7, which is the First Amendment to the 2016 Regional Transportation Improvement Program.
Nafili Barrett has written a staff report that she'll be going over here in just a second. My only introduction is that we just adopted the 2016 RTIP at our December meeting, as you will all remember. That was based on the fund estimate that was developed was developed over last summer and adopted in August of 2015. The feeling of the California Transportation Commission that adopted it at that time was that they were optimistic that new funding would materialize, and they saw that the legislature had gone into special session trying to address the state funding problem for highways, and now we are 6 months later, found nothing has been acted upon with any new legislation that would solve this problem with the STIP, and there's still a complication with the Board of Equalization, how they determine the amount that can be added or subtracted from the existing gas tax to make it neutral. And to summarize it, everything's still a mess, and they are bound legally to change the fund estimate if the state law does not reflect the conditions as they know it. They had warned us that they may have to do this. It came much earlier than I had ever suspected. I thought they were thinking that sometime within the next year and a half they would do it, but we just turned around and said, well, we need to reflect reality, and we need you to go back and look at what you had previously programmed and make adjustment to it. And they gave us until February 26th to do this, and this is the only meeting we have planned. And with that, I'll let Smiling Nafili here give you the good news.
So, as Phil mentioned, you just adopted the 2016 Regional Transportation Improvement Program in December, and we are already needing to... Okay. And it's already time to approve an amendment to that RTIP in order to address this funding shortfall. So Phil's already told you a lot about the revised fund estimate that was adopted just recently by the California Transportation Commission, due primarily to the revised projected estimates for the price-based excise tax. There were actually 3 options that the Transportation Commission looked at when adopting a revised fund estimate. What they went with was sort of the middle of the road adjusted fund estimate. There was actually another projection that would have essentially called for deleting every single project in the State Transportation Improvement Program. So what they went with, like I said, is sort of a middle-of-the-road option. It results in a negative balance over the 5-year STIP period of approximately $750 million across the state. So what that means is that while the RTIP that we adopted in December included delays of our existing STIP-funded projects, we now have to delete some of our projects. Regions all across the state will be deleting some of their projects. We were provided with a target for project deletion. However, CTC staff was hesitant to provide targets because some agencies will be able to, very large agencies will be able to delete one or two very large projects that will accommodate quite a bit, while some of these small rural counties have fewer projects to choose from when determining which ones to delete. So we have a target, but that target is simply that. It's a target. It's not, we do not have to meet that exactly. The other thing that we were provided with by the California Transportation Commission is a list of allocation priorities. This is something that's been adopted for allocations this year, but we anticipate that this will continue for the duration of this STIP period unless something changes as far as revenue is concerned. So that was something that we, when looking at projects to delete, we took that into consideration. It was one of the primary considerations when looking at projects to delete. Unfortunately, because of the short time frame provided by the CTC, we were not able to meet with the Technical Advisory Committee to present a recommendation to you. However, we have spoken with the individual agencies, and they are all aware of what we're proposing. And although everybody would prefer to keep all of their projects fully funded, there was an understanding of the situation that we're facing. So in my staff report, you'll see that we have come up with a recommendation for projects to delete. There are 4 projects that we're proposing would be affected. The county's North State Interchange and Intersection project. That was a project that has only programming for pre-construction components at this time. We've previously earmarked funding for construction of that project, but it was never programmed, so just pre-construction components. Ukiah's roundabout at Low Gap and Bush, and that would be both pre-construction and construction. Fort Bragg's Route 1 bike and ped improvements, and that also would be construction and the project development. And then the locally funded state highway project in Wallala, the Wallala Downtown Streetscape, which had programming only for the environmental component at this time. So all of those that we are proposing for deprogramming fall into the last 2, the very bottom 2 priorities on this list, which was included with your staff report. This is what I was mentioning, the CTC's list for allocation priorities. The last 2 items on the list are pre-construction funding for projects on the state highway system and pre-construction funding for projects on local roads. So pre-construction meaning environmental, design, and right-of-way. So although 2 of these projects have construction funding, before you get to that construction funding, you have 3 components of pre-construction that you would have to get allocations for, and those would be the very lowest priority for the CTC. So even if they were not deleted from programming, it is I'm 99% certain that when the local agency went to request an allocation from the CTC, that allocation would be denied. So in essence, even if we don't delete them, the CTC would just put them off and it would have the same effect.
I'd like to add to that point. By law, the State Transportation Improvement Program, as you recall, consists of 5 years of projects. And by law, they cannot overprogram. So they're looking ahead at what the fund estimate is, and whatever they come up with has to fit within that 5-year window. And if they didn't do that, what we're saying is we have this list of allocation priorities that's attached, and if somewhere along the line funding didn't materialize, but they didn't adjust the STIP, they would look at the already adopted allocation priorities, and year by year we would be waiting to start a project, and they say, oops, there's no funding there. Look where you are. You're at the second to the bottom of the list. We're not going to allocate. We're going to give it to one of these higher priority projects. So deleting hurts, but in effect it would happen anyway under the current circumstances, because there isn't the funding, the revenue support to fund the existing program. And so when we went through and looked at this, it was very obvious to us which ones had to be deleted, because they, even if they weren't deleted, the California Transportation Commission would not allocate funding for us anyway. Is that clear?
I have a clarifying question. So the two projects that have construction dollars, if those local agencies, City of Ukiah, City of Fort Bragg, if they said, you know, we'll fund the engineering right away, we just want construction dollars. If the only money requested for those projects was construction dollars, would they still be left unfunded by the CTC?
They would be higher on the list. Let's see. So for, let's say, the Fort Bragg project, active transportation projects is 5th from the bottom. So rather than being at the very bottom, that project would be 5th from the bottom. And actually the operational improvements, which is what, say, the roundabout would be considered, as well as, well, the county's project doesn't have construction, but both of those would be considered operational improvements on local roads, and so those would be just one priority above active transportation projects, so those would be 6th from the bottom. So there'd be a lot of priorities above those, even if they were just construction funding.
Okay.
Interestingly, in sort of a change from past allocation priority lists, local road rehab is actually above either of those things. It's about, falls, well, it's 7th from the bottom.
Yeah, yeah. It used to be dead last.
Yes, it used to be last, and so this isn't the first time we've had a list of allocation priorities. This has happened in the past, and typically we see local road rehab at the very bottom of the list. So, so you have that list in your packet. So this proposal totals about $3.1 million for deleted programming. Our target was $3.7 million, so we are a little bit under our target. However, we think, you know, it's four projects, and so we are hoping that that works along with what the rest of the state will be proposing. As part of our recommendation, we have also suggested that priority be given to these projects that are being deleted for reprogramming in the future when there is funding capacity available in the STIP, and that's something that's included in the resolution that was attached to your staff report. There are a couple of possibilities for additional funding, and there's actually some very good information in the information packet. So the governor's budget and AB 1591 have both recently proposed some increased revenue for transportation, including the STIP. However, the STIP program right now is so underfunded that even if those, if additional revenue were to be approved and materialize, for a while it would only provide enough to restore what we are currently deleting. it's unlikely that we would see increased capacity for several years. So, but we are proposing that these projects would receive priority for reprogramming, assuming that they are still local agency priorities at the time that funding becomes available. So there is a resolution attached to the staff report that identifies the projects to be deleted, as well as establishes that those would receive priority for reprogramming. And this is a public hearing, so we do need to open the public hearing for comment.
Unless you have further questions of staff first.
Director Armstrong?
Yeah, your answer about the priority for reprogramming answered one of my questions. The other was, so the shortfall exists in the present, but
yes.
But is there any pending funding change, either federally or state, that may change that, like in the next year or something? I mean, is this at some level, or maybe at both federal and state level, people playing chicken with the system and saying, well, if you continue to not do a transportation bill, this is what's going to happen, and to show you what's going to happen, we're doing it. I mean,
let me respond to this.
So that's, and maybe it's just of academic interest of whether that's what's going on, but is that, I mean, because it's sort of my sense that we have the potential that transportation funding may be increased both federally and at the state, but both processes are stalled in some way. And am I correct about that or not?
Not exactly. The federal bill was just passed just a matter of weeks ago, and it's.
But has it worked its way through the system?
It hasn't worked its way through the system, but there's not we don't see a substantial increase in the funding that's available that will be coming in the State Transportation Improvement Program. What's called FAST?
Yes.
The FAST Act. Don't ask me, but it has some kind of acronym. But that will be working its way through, but it's not a substantial increase from the previous amount. And as we said at the beginning, the governor has a proposal for state funding. Also, there's a couple of other bills that are being considered, and the special session of the legislature had continued right in to when the existing legislature takes off. So they haven't stopped working on a state bill, and that is still in the works. Now, one of the things, since I attended that's why I didn't want Nafili to talk, because he wasn't there. I attended the California Transportation Commission meeting on January 21st when they discussed all of this. And there were some people, some of the commissioners were into the mode of, well, let's just show them how bad it is, and there was 3 different types of forecast available, and I think Nafili mentioned that before. They took the middle of the road one that they ultimately thought was the best one to adopt for the fund estimate. There were people on the commission, they were arguing for a much more pessimistic one that they thought that would drive legislative action if they saw how bad it really was. Well, let's show them how it really hurts. And there was that argument made by a couple of them. But to their credit, and those of us who've gone to meetings of the commission for the last 35 years know this, they have to adopt a fund estimate that is based on the law, current law, even though some variables of interpretation, but one of them took a so severe and pessimistic direction that after a lot of discussion by staff, urging them not to take that because they really couldn't certify that that's what the law really says is going to happen. They took the middle of the road one and adopted. So there was some sentiment to doing that, but but to their credit, I don't believe the California Transportation Commission did that. What the line that they took that came up and determined how much the cuts were pretty bad enough. It's about a third of the entire program is going to be cut due to the path that they did take. Did that answer it?
Yeah, no, I was up to see Senator McGuire one time, and he was stuck in a transportation committee meeting, so I went and sat there and waited for him, and there's definitely some politics going on in that process, and so, but
yeah,
what I think I'm mainly concerned about was what happens to our local process and our, because locally we've prioritized these things, but
Yes.
that priority is going to carry on by this.
Well, that's what we're proposing.
What
is,
you're proposing in the.
Yeah, we just adopted this not long ago, and we would hope that we'd honor the.
So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't, like, put all these projects back to square one and then find out at some point in the near future, oh, there is more money available or something.
Right.
That's the intent of what Nafili put in the resolutions, to say, hey, we'll just pick up where we took off.
Unless we were to learn that those projects were no longer local agency priorities. Are there other questions?
I just have one more comment. One of the things that they were urging us, all of the local agencies, to do is to make sure that our local legislators, the assembly members and our local senators, are aware of how drastic these cuts are and name the specific projects that we're cutting. I do have, and so that will hopefully spur on the legislature to do something at the state level to help towards this relief. And I do have a letter here that, assuming it has the projects that we're proposing ready to go out to the legislators, informing of them about how much it hurts the local agencies. In this case, one Ukiah project, one Fort Bragg project, the two largest cities, one in the county, and another one that's relatively small, but it's a locally sponsored state highway project that would finally begin the streetscape project in Wallala. So I do have that ready to go. At one point I was going to show it to you anyway, but they are urging us to let the legislators know how serious this is.
So do we have any other questions before we go to public comments for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The previous director's question answered part of mine, and I talked to Charlie Fielder today about the Covelo project, but I wanted to hear from you before I reassured my constituents that that safety project was not a part of this that could have been cut or considered, or is it safe, do you think, from future cuts that may be used to push drama for legislation purposes?
So the Covelo project is actually a totally separate funding source, and that funding source is the only game in town right now.
Yes.
It's the only game in the state right now. That is part of the Active Transportation Program, which is outside of the STIP completely, and there are multiple funding sources that go into that program, none of which are impacted by the price-based excise tax. So it is safe, and that program is safe.
That's what I was assuming. I just wanted to hear it from you before I repeated it to people on the hills.
Before I came in, I took a final review of the request for proposals to start the environmental process on that, and it will be going out this week.
Okay, if there are no other questions for staff, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I've got it right. So that everything on this list that is likely to be removed here, they are off the plate, no further consideration for at least a year. Is that
Well,
accurate?
I would say I suppose there's always a possibility that the CTC could, if revenues changed, they could release a new fund estimate. There have been let's see, I think 2006, and then there were two. 2002 maybe and 2006. We had STIP augmentations. So between the normally in the summer or fall of every odd numbered year, we get a fund estimate, and then we start preparing our RTIP for programming in the STIP. However, when there have been more funds than were anticipated at the time of the fund estimate, significantly more, they will do a STIP augmentation. I have heard from one of the CTC staff in a workshop that it is unlikely, even if one of these things were to be approved, it is unlikely that they would do a STIP augmentation at this time, because really things would be so far out within the 5-year programming window that coming in and letting people put things back in before the 2018 STIP isn't really going to make any difference anyway. So so I would say yes, most likely they are off the table for discussion as far as STIP funding, at least until 2018. I wouldn't be surprised if it's longer, but I can't say that for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's longer either, but the next regular fund estimate would be in August of 2017, year and a half.
Thank you.
Okay, so have we had proper notice for the public hearing today?
So there's actually, this is not a legally noticed public hearing.
All right. So I'd like to open the public hearing at 3:25.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chairman. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm the city engineer for the city of Ukiah. Want to say thank you to the MCOG staff for working with us on this. We agree with the recommendation. Very disappointed with the recommendation, but not at the staff level, at the CTC level. Our project is the roundabout here at Low Gap and Bush, which if any of you have ever enjoyed the high school, dropping off a high school kid, it's a nightmare. And so that project is obviously going to be gone. That's, $0.8 million to this area, which that hurts. And however, it will give me a chance to educate the new city council on the importance of roundabouts. But we want to say we support the resolution, and we are very happy to see that in it is the priority for reprogramming for the certain projects that are being recommended for elimination. So, thank you very much.
We'll fire up that micro simulation model and demonstrate the value of a roundabout.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I do see Howard DeShiel from the County Transportation Department.
Mr. Chair, just real briefly, I think what Nafili said is true. It's there's a reduction in the funds that are coming in because price of gas has gone down. These projects make the most sense. I will say that we were looking at 101 North State Street interchange because some of you on the council recall there was a casino proposal, and that casino hasn't really come to fruition. Right now, the latest thing is to work with the industrial park proposal, and I think their interest is more in Ford Road and another access. So it just makes sense all the way around. Sure, no one likes to see project money go away, but this probably makes the most sense. So,
do we have any other public comments? Not seeing any, we'll close the public hearing at 3:28. And do you have any more questions from board members? Does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
Second it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Again, I think we should probably have a roll call vote.
It's a resolution.
It's a resolution, and there's money involved.
Aye.
Scalabrini,
Aye.
Stransky,
Yes.
Kugel,
Aye.
Ranichak,
Yes.
Woodhouse,
Aye.
and Jurdy.
Yes. Okay, we have been going for 2 hours, but I don't know if we should take a 5-minute break or just plow ahead. What's the? We'll take a 5-minute break.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Before you do, I think Janet handed out that sample letter that I intend to send to legislators, and anybody has any concern with it, says February 2nd. I won't mail it out till the 3rd if you have any concerns with any of the language in there.
So you have it addressed to Wood, but would go to.
Pardon me?
It's addressed to Assemblyman Wood, but it would go to
Yeah,
Senator
the same
McGuire
one
as
will
well.
go, yeah, to the assembly, to the senator.
Okay, well, thank you for the letter, and with that, we'll take a 5-minute break. Reconvene, and the next thing on our agenda is the consent calendar. The following items: we have minutes of December 7th, 2015, adoption of resolution M 2016 approving final procurement policies and procedures, which we discussed at length in previous meetings, and adoption of another resolution approving the allocation of California Proposition 1B funds for the Transit System Safety, Security, and Disaster Response Program. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
Go ahead.
We have resolutions involved.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote.
Okay. Any public comment on the consent calendar? Not seeing any. Okay. Roll call.
Rex Jackman,
Aye.
Doug Hammerstrom,
Aye.
Steve Scalmanini,
Aye.
Larry Stransky,
Yes.
Jim Kugel,
Aye.
Susan Ranichak,
Yes.
Tom Woodhouse,
Yes.
Dan Jurdy.
Yes. And now we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee and reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Do we have a motion to ratify the action of the Policy Advisory Committee?
So moved.
And seconded.
Okay. I think this we could just do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And now we're on to reports. Informational reports, Mendocino Transit Authority. I could just give a brief update. Mendocino Transit Authority has, on a short-term basis, hired former General Manager Bruce Richard to step in as interim General Manager, and we are in the process of recruiting for a General Manager. There'll be, as in the past, there will be review panels. I think, Phil, you were requested to sit on a future review panel when the interviews take place, and there'll be board members. The MTA board will also be on the interview panel when that takes place. This main item there. North Coast Rail Authority, no report, Loretta?
Loretta informs me there was no January meeting.
Okay. And MCOG staff summary of meetings, we do have that. Is there anything you want to highlight?
Nothing. I just want to highlight the information that I put in there under item D2, the road charge pilot project, and which is being considered. And the pilot project is getting underway in a few months, and they're looking for volunteers who might want to do this. And all the information you need in order to volunteer for the pilot project is in there. What we need, they're specifically asking for people in rural areas to participate. So that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So then we have MCOG administrative staff updates. Willets bypass. Or did you just covered all that?
Well, I was in the wrong spot. I was in summary meetings. I have nothing to add. I was looking ahead. Yeah, I covered all that.
Okay, great. Well, we're really going along quickly here. MCOG planning staff, verbal reports.
Oh, I had something on miscellaneous. Are you
Okay.
guys got ahead of me there? We just
Get ahead
handed
of myself.
out We just handed out to you our annual letters for filing the Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest.
So thank you for this. I've already turned in my Form 700 over to the clerk's office.
Did you list MCOG?
And I listed MCOG, but do I need to still provide you a hard copy?
We'll make you a copy.
Yeah, we can get copies from the clerk. So if you've done that, that's the easiest path to get it done. All you need to do is list, MCOG or MCOG director on the line, the line for the other
almost
committees.
all of us are on several boards. So, for
Yeah.
example, also I filled it out.
Right.
I listed MTA. Will that go to MTA?
If they request a copy, we'll give them a copy.
Yeah.
They usually don't.
Okay, all right.
That fulfills the purpose, so.
Mr. Chair? Yes, I filled out like Dan did and wrote you in, so it's available.
Great. So everybody's on top of it this year, it sounds like. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if you haven't done that, just when you do your regular filing, add that line item, and that'll be good. We'll get a copy of it. If you could email a PDF, that'd be good too. Okay, so those are the Form 700s. The miscellaneous that I had is just to let you know, and I've emailed you, I think, about the Clean Cities Symposium. What it is the alternative transportation fuels readiness project for the Northwest region that we've been a part of for the past year or so, and that's kind of winding up right now. We're working with the 5 counties in the North State, Humboldt, Del Norte, Siskiyou, Trinity, and us here in Mendocino. So the final task, aside from a report that will be turned in, a plan, is this symposium that we're putting on. And we've, as a group, decided that the best approach to that was to form a Clean Cities Coalition, or talk about forming one. This is a program the U.S. Department of Energy has had for many years, and it actually supplies some funding and some resources. It's mainly intended for fleet operators or fuel distributors, other stakeholders who actually deal with vehicles and fleets, and it can work together, collaborate on making a transition over to other fuels. And so we've talked about forming a Clean Cities coalition of these northern counties, because none of us is really big enough to do this on our own. And so it'll just be kind of a support group and keep the efforts going that we've initiated here. So that's what this flyer is. I sent it to all the board members. I sent it to the TAC members, and then we have a stakeholders list from the project that we've invited. It's invitational, and so it's going to be based in Eureka, but we're going to have a webinar linked to the meeting from here in Ukiah and at the MCOG offices, and there will be another one linking in from Shasta RTPA. And so we'll have 3 locations doing a kind of a long distance meeting, and so we're encouraging people with an interest in this to attend here in Ukiah, or you can go on up to Eureka and do it too. Or to Shasta if you want to drive a long way. So anyway, we're kind of winding up the project with that, and I'll report out when that's all done. So if you know somebody in your one of your agencies that ought to hear about that, let me know or pass it on. Thank you very much.
Okay, if that covers miscellaneous, then we'll go to MCOG planning staff, verbal reports.
Can you leave it?
I can sit.
Oh, where are we there?
I'm already there. And the mic's on. So I'm going to report on the local transportation sales tax initiative. This is an item that is in our planning work program. We funded voter opinion surveys for potential transportation sales tax for the city of Ukiah and the unincorporated Mendocino County. The surveys were actually conducted between January 6th and 19th. There were a sample size of 400 for the unincorporated county and 300 within the city of Ukiah, and those were of actual likely voters based on likeliness to vote in the presidential election based on previous voting history. So I am going to just go over some highlights of the survey results. Some of you have already heard this. We had a meeting on Friday. Thanks, Dan.
This is Monday. I was
Yes.
reading it.
We had a meeting on Friday where the consultant that is conducting the polling came and went over the results with us. There are 2 Board of Supervisors members and 2 City Council members from the City of Ukiah, as well as some staff members from both local agencies as well. So overall, the consultant seemed really pleased with the level of support that was expressed in both jurisdictions, and I will just go over some highlights of that. So in the unincorporated area of the county, this would be, we did 2 separate surveys because these would be 2 separate ballot measures independent of each other. So there was 66% that would be in favor of a sales tax for basically county road preservation, and 27.6% in opposition. So that's broken down into sort of varying levels of support and opposition. 45.63% would definitely vote yes, 15.3% probably yes, 15.1% would lean to voting yes, 2% would lean to voting no, 4.8% would probably vote no, 20.8% would definitely vote no, 2% needed more information, and 4.4% didn't know. Before I go further, I just want to explain the intent of the poll was really just to determine the level of support for these sales tax measures. So there were a lot of different questions asked that not only gauge the level of support, but also if there were a sales tax measure, what types of things they would be interested in seeing in such a measure, the level of public trust as far as administering, that would relate to administering a sales tax. So a lot of different questions, and I'm just going over the highlights here. So in the county, 80% of respondents felt that as far as a list of potential problems, county roads in need of repair was a very or somewhat serious problem. 84% felt that fixing potholes was extremely or very important. And when explained that resources produced by this sales tax could only go so far, and if you had to choose between fixing residential roads or fixing the busiest roads that people drive on every day, 21.4% chose residential, and 67% chose the busiest. In the city of Ukiah, overall there was 63.3% in favor of the measure and 30.8% opposed to the measure. That was made up of 45.2% that would definitely vote yes, 13.5% that would probably vote yes, 4.6% that would lean toward voting yes, 2.5% that would lean toward voting no, 7.6% that would probably vote no, 20.7% that would definitely vote no, 2.1 needed more information, and 3.8 didn't know. Interestingly, in the Ukiah survey, so the way the survey was structured, it asked some sort of introductory questions and then asked people if they would be in favor of this ballot measure. Then it goes through and asks some more specific questions related to the ballot measure, and at the end asks again if they would be in favor of the ballot measure. Typically, and in the case of the county survey, the numbers will often go up a little bit as people get more information about what the measure might include. In the case of the city's survey, it actually went down slightly, which was surprising, considering the city respondents' answers on some of the other items. So in the city, 88.7% of respondents said that city streets in need of repair is a very or somewhat serious problem. 90% said fixing potholes is extremely or very important, and 69% of respondents said that the city needs more funding for street repair. So those are just some highlights of the results. So there are remaining decisions to be made, including whether each of these agencies wants to pursue a tax at all. That'll be something for the City Council and the Board of Supervisors to take action on. Whether if they pursue sales tax, whether they will be a general tax, which needs 50% plus one approval, or a specific tax, which would need 2/3 of the vote. And then how a cow campaign would be run, who would run that campaign. And that's something MCOG is obviously limited in what they can do. We can provide education and information, but we're not able to campaign. So we're waiting for some detailed results of the surveys. We just got the top line results, and we'll be getting the detailed results within the next few days from our consultant, and then holding another meeting to decide how to move forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So just looking at the county raw numbers, not in the poll, but just the raw numbers about the county roads, 650 miles of paved county roads, and there are the equivalent Highway 101 which is Caltrans maintained, is 105 miles, and so I kind of routinely will tell people, so multiply that times 6, and you almost have. And then maybe add in Fort Bragg City Roads, Ukiah City Roads, Willett City Roads, Point Reyna City Roads, and now you've got the county road network of county-maintained paved roads. And with that, the county has stepped up its funding of the roads within its own budget and created a line item to pave county roads, so it's now $2 million a year. Historically, the county was only spending, up until recently, about $500,000 a year out of the county funds towards the roads. So we've really stepped that up a bit. The county has a sales tax outside of the cities. My understanding would generate about $2.1 million. So that would double it again to $4 million. And although the numbers I've seen from county staff is that really the roads need about maybe $7 million a year just to maintain their current condition without the pavement condition index deteriorating further. What would be the comparable numbers for the city of Ukiah? I mean,
as far as an annual need for...
And how many road miles the city of Ukiah has, and maybe if you don't have it here, I'm just thinking those would be good numbers probably for the city of Ukiah.
I think it's in the magnitude of 25, 30 miles.
Yeah, that is, that's about right. I do have that information, unfortunately, not with me and not off the top of my head. I know that, just due to the difference in size of the network, the significant difference in size of the network, it's a much lower amount that's needed in the city.
I mean, but on the other hand, cities have basically roads that are on average twice as wide as county roads because they have at least 2 travel lanes, parking on the side. Then they've got sidewalks, and sidewalks are almost as expensive as the road itself. They've got drainage systems that counties don't have. So their cost per mile is probably 2-3 times what it is for the county.
Right. There are a lot of requirements as a result of ADA that really increase project costs in urban areas because of all those.
So anyway, it just seems like the city of Ukiah wants to be able to rattle off those statistics in sort of manageable bites of information for people to get. Director Hammerstone?
Yeah, and with Fort Bragg having this measure, we at our meeting last week, we were talking about a road project that's going to happen this summer, and maybe another thing would be to develop for the cities that do have it, what percentage of their road budget is coming from that revenue source. because like I can't imagine how we would be managing our roads without this revenue source. And I don't know what percentage of what we spend on roads it is, but that would be good information to let other decision makers know that there is this significant portion of revenue out there that would make your decisions much more doable.
And I think that's actually a great thing for the county and city of Ukiah is we have these local success stories that we can point to that have, really shown what an improvement in the local street system looks like once the sales tax is in place. So.
Yeah, and specifically what I was saying, having that additional revenue source and what percentage of our revenue source is that, and I don't know off the top of my head the answer to that, but just knowing that whatever you have in Ukiah that you might have X amount more.
If one or both agencies elect to proceed with this, we'll gather that information. Have it available.
Well, I think we do know that the pavement condition studies that were done prior to the sales tax in Fort Bragg showed that Fort Bragg's condition was either the worst or second worst in the county.
Second worst.
Second worst, and now Fort Bragg's city streets are the best or second best in the county.
I believe Fort Bragg's are the best currently. We have a graphic that is in the presentation for the pavement management program update that was done a couple years ago. But it very clearly demonstrates, there's the 2002 data showing Willits and Fort Bragg at the bottom and Ukiah and county at the top as far as pavement condition index. Both those cities were successful in implementing transportation sales tax measures, and it completely reversed. Fort Bragg and Willits are now up here, and the county and Ukiah are now down here. So.
And Point Arena went up.
Yes, we don't have separate data for Point Arena's 2 miles of streets.
But the member is here.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
I'd just like to point out that, Mr. Chair, that reading the newspaper yesterday, the day before, there was already a letter to the editor about somebody who writes frequently with a recognizable name, and so the information is out there, and so we do have this information, and I will be putting out a press release regarding this soon, this week.
Okay. Okay, now we're on to, I believe, CalCog director's reports. I don't have anything to report.
Nothing to report, I don't think.
MCOG board member reports. Anybody have anything to report that we haven't covered already? Okay, well, at 4:05, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry for the late start. It's not our fault. You guys know who to blame. Right, Doug?